Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 20 Community Development Committee meeting. We'll start out with a roll call.
Dan Hansen.
Here.
Scott Counter.
Present.
Jerry Van Zomeren.
Here.
Sean Anderson.
Present.
Ryan Shirley.
Present.
We have two sets of meeting minutes to approve. Does anybody have any questions or comments or concerns with either the Thursday, September 15 or Wednesday, September 28 minutes? Seeing none, we'll let them stand as approved. And I see nobody here from the public, but I'll say it anyway in case there's somebody in the hallway. We'll call for public comment. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make a comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. There are no public hearings today, so we'll go to the business items. Number one is a resolution to accept the Town of St. Joseph sign and zoning ordinance text, and that would be Mr. Hilgers giving us a staff presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. I will start out on packet page 8, just to give you a brief overview. As Chairman Hansen mentioned, the item for your consideration is a resolution approving various amendments to the Town of St. Joseph signage and zoning ordinances. Under state statute, even though the town has their own zoning ordinance, the county still has to ratify and approve all the changes. So on the background memo, I just briefly summarized and highlighted those changes. Sign changes include anything that was related to political signage. So they're looking at regulations that amend signage setbacks from edges of street to ensure traffic and pedestrian safety. That's more for the sight distance issue for pedestrians and vehicles pulling out into intersections. Eliminating the size restrictions for political signs. Under statute in Wisconsin, jurisdictions cannot limit the size of political signs. And then provisions also include not allowing political signs containing electrical, mechanical, or audio auxiliary, which they can also regulate by statute. And we do too as a county, by the way. Some of the zoning changes include adding and eliminating some various definitions, establishing development standards for commercial kennels, allowing adjustments to be considered for off-street parking requirements, and then eliminating public campgrounds as a permitted use in the Conservancy zoning district. And that's the one item staff had pointed out to the Town of St. Joseph in communication in reviewing the code that they're submitting and how that impacts St. Croix County. If that provision were to be adopted, we would be limited in how we could develop the Eckert-Bluffland County Park in the St. Joseph portion of the park area. As the committee may recall, the Eckert-Bluffland Master Plan was approved in February of this year. As part of that master plan adoption, we did indicate hike-in camping on the northern portion of the park boundary. So if the town were to adopt this provision, that would basically preclude or prohibit the county from implementing the master plan and developing that area consistent with the master plan. So we did have some communication with the Town of St. Joseph. I had been in contact with Chair Teresa Johnson, and she had requested that the county consider approving the amendments except for that prohibition. They are aware of that, and they, pending county board approval, they will go back and reinsert the public campground language. So before you tonight is the resolution that would approve the changes to the signage and zoning ordinance with the exception of the public campground prohibition in the Conservancy district. We reviewed the other changes. We did not see any concerns or any negative impacts that it would have on the county except for the one I just highlighted. So that's just kind of a quick overview of what's before you.
Before we make a motion, I just want to ask the question, did we run this through the Corporation Council, and what was her opinion on having a red line right on the resolution?
All resolutions go to Corporation Council, and she had no concerns that she brought up to us about it.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Mr. Hilgers?
That concludes my overview.
All right. We will need... I apologize for the sidebar. We would need a motion.
So moved.
All right, and we'd need a second.
Second.
All right, further discussion. Scott?
Just had one question on it. This is their ordinance and everything, but I was just curious as I was reading through it for signage for people that have for rent or for sale signage, how that was addressed in there, because I seen how it addressed it for businesses and business signage, but just wondering on temporary signage.
Do you know what packet page that's on?
I'm sorry, it was part in the town of St. Joe's. As I was reading through it, I was just looking for any information that would identify what's allowable for temporary signage for like real estate signage for sale or for rent.
And we don't typically review the content of the other portions of the code. We really focus on what they're amending. But I can get back to you on that and research that. Okay. Okay.
All right, I think if there's no other questions, we should put her to a vote.
Excuse
I'm
me.
sorry, Jerry?
John, I have a question for you on, I notice on page 15 that they take out the junk, as if there isn't going to be any junk there. So I'm wondering where they're going to put that. It's on packet number 45, page 45.
Oops.
I know when we went through the county one, that junk was in there. Oh, right there. They do kind of add in the junkyard part, but that's not the same as private junk. That's probably like junkyard, and it talks about selling and
I'm
resell.
not sure. They may have moved it into their maintenance portion of their ordinance, and I can certainly follow up and look at that too.
So I'm hearing a couple of concerns. Are we still okay with voting on it? We're good? All right. I have one concern, but it's not going to slow me down voting on it. They have definitions of types of signs, which puts them in, from what I learned when we did the sign ordinance for St. Croix County, they're in thin ice with the First Amendment as far as I can see, but that's going to be their problem. I'm not a constitutional lawyer. So, why don't we put it to a vote? Are you ready? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes. Why don't we move on? The second business item is a resolution approving public participation procedures for the St. Croix County 2012 through 2035 Comprehensive Plan 10-year update. This is exciting stuff, and Ellen will present it.
Yeah, so, good evening. So as it states in our document, a little further up in the background statement, the comprehensive plan and the state planning law requires that we periodically and usually it's strongly recommended that we do it every 10 years, update our comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plans usually are for, they can be for different time frames, but anywhere from 20 to 35 years can be a document life cycle. This one was intended to be about 25 years. So it's been 10 years since we first adopted it in 2012, and we're right on the cusp. There were a few minor updates to land use maps, that kind of thing, in the past 10 years, but this gives us a chance to take a little better look at it. It's not a complete rewrite, as we note in the background. It's a update, and it's partly generated by the census data becoming available, which gives us background information and reference data that we can look at and compare and see what the trends are in our county. We are doing the farmland preservation update, which we have already started and have already done a survey on and that kind of thing, and so it ties into that document also, which we did as part of the 2012 plan and we will do as part of this plan. So that's kind of the background as to why we are doing it. There is an attached 18-month calendar to give you the overall, it's a draft, and it's a draft because it gives you an overall approach of all the elements that have to go into the plan and all the steps that we have to take, but it will be subject to change as different things move forward, time frame, different things happen. But it does give you your overall perspective, and it goes back to in our document where we talk about that the whole project will go from August of this year, where we've already begun starting it, to approximately spring of 2024. So, and we note in the second part of this, we note also the various elements that are required under state statute that must be in a comprehensive plan. Some of them are very big elements, ag, natural, and cultural resources, for instance. Utility and community facilities encompasses an awful lot of things, but some of the elements are very straightforward. Housing, for instance, economic development, another one. Again, it's not a complete update, and based on what the county has the most input and ability to influence, this planning statute was written for cities, villages, and towns and counties, and each of those levels of government have different authorities and different abilities as what they regulate, and so sometimes there are parts that don't fit perfectly in, say, a town plan versus a city plan. So our main focus is land use, agricultural, natural resources, transportation sections, and then a few others. But those will be the main focus of our efforts, but we will look at every portion of the plan and touch on every portion of it. Okay? So we already have 2 public visioning sessions scheduled. Those will be opportunities to look at issues and opportunities and talk a little bit about the vision of the county for the remaining time frame. Those are scheduled for December 1st here at the Government Center and December 8th at the Baldwin Highway Shop. Okay. With that, we have our draft resolution here, basically identifying the process that we'll go through, and that we have to have public participation procedures adopted by the County Board of Supervisors according to statute. So the document, what is our exact public participation procedures, is attached. It's a little 1.5-page document. Takes the paragraph right out of the statute. It tells us what we must do. Describes how we have to provide for wide distribution, we have to describe the methods that we will utilize, and we have to make sure that we are getting input from non-metallic mineral extraction property owners. That's the best way to say it. And we identified everything that we can think of to date, and we've tried to expand this to have a lot more opportunities to utilize electronic media compared to what we did 10 years ago. So committee meetings, obviously, electronic media, including website, Facebook page. We'll use some news blasts, email promotions to get people to come to meetings and educate and inform. We also hope to utilize some online mapping tools such as story maps and heat maps and that kind of thing. We're also adding online opportunities to provide input, plus our survey that's already out there and already being reviewed. We went through the Survey Research Center in River Falls, which we've done many times in the past in the county, and the Survey Research Center has put out an electronic mailing, and that survey is going pretty well so far. And it's open until November, right before Thanksgiving. Thank you. Couldn't remember the exact date. Also, then, as we keep going through the process, there are public meetings, which I just described, which we held to kind of introduce the plan to the public. There'll be survey results and other materials published online to keep people informed. We will have updates to this committee on a regular basis, and we will also look to other units of government that we will tap into and ask for input, especially the towns who are our partners when it comes to administering land use regulations, because we mostly regulate in the rural areas, of course, not in the cities and villages. But just so you understand, too, state law requires that city and village comprehensive plans we have to take into account as we are doing our county comprehensive plan. And so the city and village plans will be incorporated as appropriate into our document. So with that, all meetings will be open to the public. All information will be available for review. As a board, you will have to conduct a committee. You will have to conduct a public hearing. And then there will also be opportunity for the county board to consider and respond to comments that are provided at the public hearing. You can also have a public comment period in addition to that. It's something that's not limited. This is the minimum. And as we state in here, these are the minimum things that we will do. Other things could be done. And once it's adopted, the comprehensive plan has to be distributed as required by statute. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a bunch of comments, kind
Sure.
of. So, and these are really thoughts for my colleagues. This is the first time, of course, that I've been through a comprehensive plan because you had just wrapped one up when I had been elected. And I've been referred back to the comprehensive plan the whole time that I've been in this office. So my thoughts are, don't miss out. We have a great staff, phenomenal staff, but what they're doing is writing policy. We're the policymakers, but we're blessed with a phenomenal staff who write policy for us to stamp and say, good job. But we need to engage with them throughout this entire process. Email your questions to them. Be engaged, pay attention, and don't get in the way while they're doing all this hard work. However, ask the questions and help as much as you can by asking your constituents, what do you think, how things are going in your world? It's important that we know what the public wants and that they know what you're thinking, so that we don't get to the end game and suddenly say, hey, wait a minute. We want this to be a very smooth process so that 2 years down the road, we don't end up questioning the work that's been done. That's really important, so that we participate at every step of the way in a helpful way. Those are my hope, that us as a committee can be helpful to our professional staff.
Exactly, and we will have the existing policies, goals, objectives, and policies for you to review on an ongoing basis as we go through the sections. And like we said, we're not expecting that you're going to change a lot of those, but certainly you're going to change some. We'll propose changes based on the feedback we receive and the input we have. I do know that, having done this several times before, it doesn't matter how good a job we do. There's always a few people who come out at the end and say, I didn't know anything about this. And that's okay. But that's why you try to do a very thorough process, and you try to do as much public input as possible throughout the process, so that you can say, well, this is the feedback we've received from the majority of the people, and then try to go from there, so that you aren't redoing the work over again.
What we're being asked to do tonight, and what we are being, what we're required to do, is to approve a process that initiates this. what I have, and what's been shown on the screen is the critical path plan, which the staff will follow, that starts this process. It's actually begun, and will lead up to the comprehensive plan being approved by the county board. So on packet page 145 is the resolution, and if you've had a chance to look it over, I would ask for a motion approving the planning process. That's correct, right, Ellen?
That is correct.
That's what I thought. Use your microphone.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Very good. Do we have a second? All right, Sean seconds. Any further discussion?
I second the motion.
Okay, we have 2 seconds. Now, is that squared or is it? Very good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. And thank you, and blessings and good luck. And if there's anything that we can do, we'll be here for you and with you. Thank you.
You'll be doing a lot of stuff.
Well, this is a lot of work, and
Yep.
and thank you. That takes us to our next business item, which is ordinance amending Chapter 15 zoning. And these are the changes that we asked to review, and John Hilgers has been working hard. Mr. Hilgers.
So, Mr. Chair and committee members, this is essentially a follow-up of the number of discussions we've had on Chapter 15, amending the St. Croix County zoning ordinance. The discussions began with you in September at the September 15th public hearing. We walked through some of the major changes. We highlighted those major changes. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the committee directed staff to set up a workshop. There were a number of issues that the committee wanted to have a little bit more focused discussion on so that they could provide staff with adequate direction to provide more specific language on a number of topics. And those topics relate to accessory structures and uses, skiing facilities, and then modification to our steep slope ordinance, which is under Chapter 15.415. So I'm going to focus on those 3 things tonight, and then if you have other questions on other parts of the code, we can certainly revisit those. But I'm first going to have you go to packet page 188, and we'll kind of just walk through and highlight the changes that we had made. And the first change has to do with accessory structures being built prior to the principal dwelling. So the language that's been added is that an accessory building may be constructed in the R1 and R2 districts prior to a principal residential dwelling if the accessory structure meets principal building setbacks. And then the second modification would read, no accessory building may be constructed in the R3 zoning district or upon, that should read any, not nay. We did correct that in the Exhibit A version. Or upon any lot in a major subdivision unless a primary residential building is under construction or is already constructed. Do we want to stop there and discuss that to make sure that reflects the direction I believe it does based on the notes we had taken from the study session? Okay.
I'm seeing thumbs up all around, John. Thank you.
All right. If I could have you turn to page 223 in the agenda packet. This deals with the skiing facilities. And we had indicated too, because we're going to be dealing with steep slopes because of the nature of the use, we wanted to make sure we added a purpose section so there was very clear intent and purpose for the public as to what our intentions are. So basically we added these 3 lines under purpose. This section, along with other parts of the zoning ordinance, has been created to regulate skiing facilities, to provide development standards for this type of use, and to regulate, manage, and protect the unique and steeper terrain in which skiing facilities are inherently located upon. We just think that's a good preface as we begin to introduce some of the standards we have in our code. It gives the public a clear direction on what our intent and purpose is. So that's been added. We kind of indicated to you we would add some general language. You just want to make sure that you're okay with that. Okay. And then the third change would be on agenda packet page 246. And this deals with the language on what we're going to be accepting on steep slopes. And so initially, we had the sentence going up to exceptions to the prohibition of development on slopes 25% or greater may include the following, subject to obtaining applicable conditional use and land use permit approvals, operations and facilities associated with skiing facilities and limited to ski slopes, trails, snowmaking equipment, ski lifts, terrain parks, and ski trail lighting. The original language stopped there, and then based on the direction we received at the study session, we added the following 3 sentences. And those would read, exceptions also include a ski chalet structure and related parking facilities, provided development on slopes of 25% or greater does not exceed 21,780 square feet, or 1/2 acre. No more than 50% of a ski chalet structure can impact slopes of 25% or greater. And then the overall impact to slopes should be the minimum amount needed to accommodate the proposed use. So the reason why we cap the no more than 50% of a ski chalet structure shall impact a slope, some of the feedback we received was that it seemed like the committee was okay with some exceptions and relaxations to going into the slopes, but they did not want the whole structure encroaching into the slope. We picked 50% more as a medium number. Nothing magical about that. We did view some other codes from other states, and they had similar type language. The reason why we capped it at 1/2 acre was because, some of the exceptions we saw in a couple other codes were in that range. There were some other exceptions that went up to 1 acre. Again, we kind of picked the in-between amount. So those were the 3 sentences that we added relating to exceptions on slopes 25% or greater. We did communicate the meeting date, and we had some initial correspondence with St. Croix National on this. We have not had any further communication from them. They knew the meeting was tonight, so I'm not sure if they viewed this or not, but this is the language we researched following the study session, and this is what we are recommending.
John, would you repeat the number of square feet that you said?
Yes, the amount of impact on slopes of 25% or greater does not exceed 21,780 square feet, or the equivalent of a 1/2 acre is what that comes out to.
Is everybody okay?
And again, no more than 50% of the ski chalet structure can impact slopes of 25% or greater.
So my question is, the 21,780 square feet, is that the parking facilities and structure combined cannot be more than that?
Correct.
So is that,
And then we put a cap on the ski chalet structure, kind of based on some of the feedback we heard at the study session.
my concern is that if we're combining parking structure and building, 21,000 square feet for, depending on what size of ski facility they're going to have, which I haven't seen the plans, but that's not a huge parking facility, or it doesn't allow for a lot of spaces. And if you're combining that with, say, a 10 or 15,000 square foot building, you're not allowing a lot of parking in that number.
It's something the BOA would have to take up. We start getting into real details like that, then we're kind of going outside the purview of this committee.
I have a clarifying question, then maybe it would help. Could they add parking that's not on a sloped area that wouldn't be counting towards this?
Correct. As long as they are not impacting slopes 25% or greater, this wouldn't apply.
So they could build the parking on a flatter spot. Yep.
Yeah, I misunderstood you. I got the part that it was all the slope, but it's just, who wants to park like that? put skis on the car. Okay. Any other questions? All right. John, continue with the...
So basically, those were the three primary changes as a result of the study session. We didn't really focus on any other provisions or changes, so I just wanted to make sure we highlighted those. Within your packet, we have the overall red line version that encompasses all of the proposed changes that would be included in this amendment. And then under Exhibit A is the clean copy, which comes a little bit further down in your packet. So if there are other questions on other parts of the code, we can certainly answer those for you.
I'm apologize for not bringing this up earlier, but there seems to be a lot of added language in the campground section of the ordinance. Are there any campgrounds that we know of that would currently not comply and have to do a lot of work to meet the new ordinance?
Likely not. A lot of this language is taken from DATCAP, Department of Agricultural Trade and Consumer Protection. So as you see under letter B, these campgrounds have to be licensed through the state, but they also have to go through a conditional use permit with our Board of Adjustment. So basically, all the provisions you see in letters B through O, the majority of those are from statute. It's just easier for our staff and Board of Adjustment to reference as we review it at a local level.
So basically, the added language is just putting the state code into our code, so it's easier to find.
Primarily, yes.
Okay.
On the sample zoning map you had on page 158 of the packet, was that a previous zoning map? Because as I was looking at the key, it didn't identify your residential 1 and 2. It just...
Yes, that is an older version when we had the old rural residential district. We do have a link actually in our online version that takes you to the current version, as it states right here. So that was just basically an example that we were using.
Okay,
And I
yeah,
think we
because
can
it
help
would
you
be a
with
little confusing otherwise with the way the zoning is in this ordinance versus that this is an old map.
That's something we could work with GIS on, Brett? Okay.
I think what those two just said was they can get it updated before it gets to county board, if that's what
Sure.
you'd like.
Yeah.
Okay, it will never be the current version, because zoning changes regularly, so
Yeah.
we'll just put in a more current version.
I mean, one that just has all the zoning codes we currently
Yes.
have would be, yeah.
Yeah, it'll just be a more current, but it'll always have to say, click here for current.
Right.
Okay, just so you everybody understood that.
Right, yep. There's just a lot less codes in this one than current version.
And then, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
under 15.1151G,
What page is that?
I did not write the page on it.
Oh, 160.
Right here.
160 on G. If I'm understanding, you're talking about, what was it? Subdivision of lots. Would that be changing from lots to parcels, or just for clarity? Subdivision of parcels? I'm just, it's a text. So right here it says the subdivision of lots, and I'm saying, lots are what you're subdividing it to. Would you want to say subdivision of parcels?
Okay, I'll let John explain that. Then the following shall
I'm just
comply.
looking at our definition of lot. Just one moment.
One thought that occurs to me is that lots can be further subdivided.
They can.
and outlots are frequently further subdivided. And another thought is that parcels can be, original parcels of 40, and they, those, if people decide to build on that, it still has to, so it would have to be parcels, or parcels also have to comply with the ordinance. I don't know if you have to say that because that is the original, public land survey, that's what I'm trying to say. So I'm not sure how that fits then.
I think we just took this out of our chapter 17 when we converted it, but the beginning of the definition of lot is a parcel of land.
Yeah, that's the thing. Then the last item was, last time we talked a little bit, we were talking about situations where we were looking at conservation design or cluster developments, and we were talking about lot sizes and compliances and is that, I was trying to find where that's all, how that's addressed in there, and wondering if, because of how we're trying to do some of this, if it still may be easier for somebody coming in with a plan, a master plan on how they're trying to do this, to still consider the 15.280 for the plan development, so that if they came in with a full plan on what they're trying to do and accomplish, and especially when you're trying to also outline parcels that will be where this will probably end up where part of it is going to be owned either by an outside entity, or if you're going to do a joint, like a small municipal sewage treatment facility that's servicing a neighborhood, and you're going to have an ownership of that and how that's all put together, where having a PD might be an easier way to try to get this as a package to come together and bring it forth, versus trying to make compliance with the current zoning ordinances with all of the districts.
Because it's not in this zoning ordinance, I think that perhaps the committee might take it up later and then amend. We have the ability to amend the zoning ordinance, and this is very complicated, and it's been discussed since the beginning of the process of doing this Chapter 15 redo. I would suggest this may not be the time to take up that discussion because of the complexity. It's just not something that we can handle in a 15-minute or 2-hour or 5-hour conversation. It involves public hearings, and it would be very, very difficult to tackle right now. I am in favor of the thing ideologically, but it would be tough to handle right now, by golly. Wouldn't you think?
Let me let John.
So there is a fundamental difference between conservation design development. We do have acknowledgement of it in our zoning code, and we have quite a lengthy section in our subdivision ordinance about conservation design. And it really gets into preserving open space and bonus density lots. When you get into a planned unit development, the planned unit development is the actual zoning district. So you're basically crafting a zoning ordinance for the planned development. So you're going to have unique setbacks, unique design standards, mix of uses, heights of buildings. It's literally a zoning ordinance. And so the original intent of the planned development district was some of the feedback we got from St. Joe. They were looking at some unique things in Holton. And so in our initial draft that ultimately got adopted, the planned development standards were in there to primarily address that. Well, once we adopted our code, St. Joe went on their own code, and that's the primary reason why we're eliminating planned development district. I can tell the committee members that we are, once this project is finished, we're going to be reviewing our land division code. And we do need to re-look at some of our conservation design standards. It just really hasn't been utilized that much, and we'd like to understand why. Look at some of the standards in that provision. Are we requiring too much open space? Is it just not a popular option for developers? Are there issues with the common septic systems, like 5 or 6 units on one system with the maintenance issues? But those are some things we'll explore under Chapter 11, Land Division. Or is that 13? Chapter 13.
Does that satisfy you, Scott?
Yeah, I guess I can agree to try to put it off because it is complex and there's a lot of things there. But part of the deal is when you're doing these, it is complex because a lot of times the sewage system is owned by another entity for doing billing purposes and everything else. A lot of times they incorporate common space in a lot of these now where they have a common ownership, so it's kind of like a condoed deal. They'll have a one-way road around, which I know we do authorize. There's a lot of things that we have that work, but some of the things like the setback requirements and some of those, they don't necessarily jive with some of the things of how they put together these types of developments. If they're going to do a one-way circle, what the intent is to try to make it so that a plow can go through and make a single pass going through and keep garages and stuff close enough. So there's a lot of things they try to do to make it so that it's more or less maintenance intensive for our northern climate. So there's a lot that goes into it, and those are the things that we'd want to look at, considerations for the future as we develop it. I agree with Dan that this is way more than we want to bite off at this point, but I do think it's something we need to consider for the future as we're going through this and try to figure out how to make it so that it's going to work in this design process when people are coming in.
Making it economically viable, I agree. So, John, continue. We have more to discuss here.
If you have other questions and other parts of the code, we can answer those. Unless you want me to walk through all the changes and summarize what we've...
No, we did that last time.
Okay.
So, unless you have more questions to the committee, at that point, I think it's appropriate that we have a motion and a second, and then get on with approving this to present it to the county board.
I make a motion that we accept the document as it is presented to us tonight.
I'll second.
Very good. We have a motion and a second. And unless there's further questions or comments, I would ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. The motion passes unanimously, and thank you very much. And thank you, John. All right, moving on. A review of mandated services. Oh, boy. No? What did I? Oh, my. I'm sorry. Overview of land use division. Sorry, Mike.
That's okay.
I was so excited for that mandated services department.
Good evening, committee members. I'm going to give an overview of the land use division as you've been getting from the other divisions within Community Development Department. I'll give you, tell you who we are, what we do, and a few highlights of the sorts of issues we deal with. Of course, I'm Mike Wozniak, Land Use Administrator. I also serve as the Zoning Administrator for the county. We have in the land use division, I have 6.5 staff positions that I supervise. That includes 3 planner positions, 2 land use technician, 2 actually. I should note that Max Erickson is a position that's split between the resource division and the land use division, 50-50 in terms of his time. So he's a land use and conservation technician for certain. And then we have one Tech 1 position as well. And I'd note that of our staff, since I've been with the county in, starting in March 2020, largely we've been short-staffed to varying degrees throughout that time, but we're currently fully staffed. And we have 3 staff members hired just in the last few months, and that would be Reed Junko, Jared Wayner, and Jake Dale. In terms of what we do, we administer and enforce a variety of ordinances, land use related ordinances, ordinances intended to protect natural resources in the county as well. Sanitary, animal waste, zoning, and there's quite a few ordinances that fall under the umbrella of zoning, and land division as well. And basically, we're doing this under authority granted to the county under various state statutes or administrative codes. The work of the division also includes, essentially, we're helping to implement a variety of policies, goals, objectives set forth in a variety of plans, policy documents of the county, and essentially through official controls, the ordinances we administer. Really, our purpose is to manage growth and change in the rural areas of the county in an orderly fashion, and to protect the county's natural resources, and essentially promote good stewardship of those resources. And I would say that that holds true for our soil and water resources. We want to limit erosion and sedimentation, and we want to protect our important water resources. And a lot of what we do, that's the purpose. More specifically, this is a list of the ordinances we administer. I would tell you, at least in my time with the county, I'd say the highest volume of time is probably spent on the ordinances that maybe fall under the broad category, well, the categories of the sanitary, land division, and the array of land use regulation related ordinances, especially our general zoning, our Chapter 15, which changes were just reviewed for you by John, and also our Shoreland Overlay District, and our Lower St. Croix Riverway Overlay District Ordinance, and our Floodplain Ordinance. And many times when we're dealing with a property, we're dealing with all of these ordinances for proposals on a single property. Just note a few recent achievements in the last year and a half, say, that I think highlight some of what we're dealing with, what we're doing. Well, I noted already we added 3 new staff members in recent months, and so we're up to our full staffing level. And this is extremely important. We're a busy shop. We're dealing with a lot of development and permitting tasks. We're dealing with a lot of code enforcement, code violations, following up on administering permit requirements where the requirements aren't being met or have been exceeded. Just as an example, our land division activity. In 2021, we were up about 9%. You can see the reference I have to the number of lots platted and on over 2,100 acres of land. All of this land division activity, and it's been steady in recent years, results subsequently in other work for the land use division, including many properties with shoreland or floodplain or riverway zoning require follow-up land use permits. The new development requires sanitary permits, including permit review and inspections. So one thing leads to another with the work we do. We've been busy with sanitary permits as well, as the numbers indicate for 2021, and including a continuation of a high number of replacement sanitary systems. The more development you get in the rural area, eventually those systems have to be replaced, and there's more permitting and more inspection. This year so far, for example, at least through September, we had issued 291 sanitary permits. So the work continues. No slowdown here yet. The work we do for other kinds of zoning permits, conditional use permits, variances, rezonings, and land use permits, has been steady. We had a big year in 2021 with land use permits. Each of these categories fluctuate a little bit. You know, as an example, there were a whole lot of rezoning of property when the current Chapter 15 was adopted in 2019, because the zoning map changed a lot. There have been less rezonings of property over the last couple years because a lot of changes took place then. But they continue to come our way, and of course they come before this committee, so you are familiar with that. And I note that the work continues with the Board of Adjustment on conditional use permits and variances. I just note a couple numbers through September of 2022, what we've seen, and the numbers don't tell the whole story either, because I would just share that some of these permit applications, they require extensive work by our staff before the application is even submitted, and there's extensive review effort required, and then there's a lot of follow-up with an inspection, sometimes subsequent permitting for a lot of the projects. I'll get into that a little more with a couple examples I'll share here shortly. This slide, I just wanted to highlight one of the issues we have is our busy sanitary program includes a lot of work with replacement systems. This map shows both spatially and numerically the number of replacement systems permitted 2018 through October of this year. And you can see the number is 653. Well, just to shed a little light on this, in the early 2000s, the county had some very big years for issuing sanitary permits. They included as many as 900, I believe. I wasn't here at the time, but I'm told of the unbelievable volume in those years. Well, those systems will be 30 years old in the coming years, and a lot of them are going to require improvement or replacement. And so there's going to be a lot of sanitary work in the coming years is the point I would make on that, and we're going to have to be prepared for that. To prepare, well, we have new staff members who are going through their training and getting their required certifications for their POUTS and soil tester certifications to be able to assist with the administration of our sanitary program. One thing we did this year that was different and unique, and hopefully will continue to do this sort of thing, is a training session with local plumber Keith Knudsen. And this was done earlier this year. And it was an example from a licensed design and installer to designer installer to actually get tips on what we should be looking for, practical issues of when these systems are being installed. So it's not just coursework and exams that our staff are taking, but they're actually learning from some of the professionals that are doing this work here in St. Croix County. The sanitary program, there are some simple, straightforward residential systems, and there are some very complicated and especially time-consuming systems that were involved with permitting and inspecting. The slides on this photo happen to be a quick trip out in the town of Katy, out in the east end of the county on would be the northeast quadrant, the interchange with 94 and 128. The soils are difficult in this area, and this is a new system just recently completed, I understand. Very large system. That's a truck stop, restaurant, quick trip, a lot of activity there. This system, there were a couple 20,000-gallon tanks installed for this system, and I understand as many as 12 mounds, lengthy mounds that were part of essentially the treatment area for this system. A lot of staff time is my point here, and this is maybe atypical, but it's not a one-time event. We have other ones. Even our system for the group camp at Glen Hills County Park, again, complicated. The capacity, the planning for future needs, as well as the fact that there were bad soils on this site as well, involved a lot of staff time in terms of inspection and interaction with the installer for this system as well. I'll note I was just out to the site last week because our division also had to do a land use permit for this project, and just checking to see that the work was going along as anticipated and there weren't any erosion or sedimentation concerns. Everything looked good, so that's what we like to see. I'm going to highlight just a couple other examples here. One project that required especially a lot of staff time, frankly educating ourselves, and involving not only land use division staff but other department staff and even corporation counsel time as well, was the review of the conditional use permit request from Avangrid Renewables for the St. Croix Valley Solar Project. This resulted in a conditional use permit being approved by the Board of Adjustment December of 2021 for a 1,000-acre, a project that will be on 1,000 acres within the towns of Richmond and Warren, and for a 99-megawatt solar energy system. The project developer has indicated their intent is to largely construct the project in 2023. And just to give the committee a sense, 99 megawatts would serve roughly the equivalent of 16,000 homes with electricity. There was both a lot of work for months preceding this with interaction with the developer and their consultants and pre-review of materials and special studies, but also there was a follow-up additional conditional use permit that was approved earlier this year for just a component of this project, a substation and an operation and maintenance building, and also land use permit to deal with grading and filling and erosion control for shoreland and floodplain areas that are within the site. So a lot of work. And also, really, the county did the bulk of work drafting a development agreement for this project, which was reviewed, of course, by our corporation counsel and attorney for the developer, that governed various aspects of the project, including provisions for decommissioning, financial assurance for decommissioning, when the project reaches its lifespan of approximately 40 years. Just a visual, this is a simulation of what part of the site would look like before and after the development of the solar project. A tilled field to a field of solar panels and pollinator grasses. Another example, and I'm flagging a few that are a little different or unusual just to give you a little sense of the breadth of what our division deals with. Mertha Sanitation, solid waste processing and transfer facility. Another conditional use permit. This was approved by the Board of Adjustment in October of 2021, but the challenge here was there was an existing business, a waste hauling business. We had to replace, really consolidate the approval for the existing business with an approval for a new business involving, again, solid waste processing and transfer facility. And this project is also both the stormwater management and the actual use is permitted also by the Wisconsin DNR. So there was coordination with the DNR required on this one as well as the applicant. But a good result and ultimately a needed facility, and I think a good facility coming will be coming online. I think they may be still in construction. Just another one that's, again, a different kind of use, something that, frankly, we get some one-off things that we haven't seen before. Even in my lengthy career, I've dealt with a couple traditional zoos, but nothing quite like this. We had a proposal for a drive-through animal park in the town of Baldwin. Again, a review of a conditional use permit. This was approved earlier this year by the Board of Adjustment, and we anticipate that it's going to go into operation next year. And I think they've leased from the property owner for about 5 years, and so their intent is to run it for at least 5 years. Diane Rickard with Fantasy Corral they've had a similar kind of use in Dunn County, I think in the Boyceville area. But there were some issues with this. There were concerns about impacts on one specific abutting property owner, and also, the town had concerns about access to where the access would come from, which town road for the property. So we had to work through a few things, and there will also be follow-up work with this that our division does. It's regulated as an agricultural entertainment use, and we require a follow-up operations plan to deal with some of the unique characteristics of ag entertainment use, the traffic, maybe in this case the temporary nature of the use, the rather unique improvements to the property that they're going to do while they operate this fun and interesting use coming to the county. I'll move on. I got another one here that we've just alluded to a little in terms of their future plans for St. Croix National Golf and Events, where they're hoping to eventually reopen the ski snowboard area. We've been dealing with St. Croix National for the last year and a half. Quite a bit of time invested by our division staff. Initially, they proposed a very broad project, including many types of improvements related to their golf and event, golf facilities and event center, addition of other facilities, including lodging and RV sites, and then the ski area, ski snowboard area as well. We work with them to meet their immediate needs, to pare down their request, and that resulted in approval of a conditional use permit for improvements to their golf clubhouse, basically an area for golf simulators, additional parking, renovation of their event center, their 250-seat event center that they do weddings and other special events, and additional parking as well, and of course always stormwater improvements. That CUP was approved by the Board of Adjustment in February of this year. We followed up with working with them on a land use permit. That project is in construction, and this is a image of what the clubhouse expansion will look like. The existing clubhouse would be this area here, maybe with a little different looking facade, and the expansion would be all of this, viewed from sort of the south golf course side of the facility, and again, currently in construction. Just give you a visual image of what that looks like. You can see there's some slope there. The back side of that building I just showed you, it's probably in the 12 to 20% range slope. There's a lot of erosion control that's required. This is what we review with land use permits and stormwater plans and follow-up inspections. But it's looking good out there, which is what we like to see. A lot of our work involves stormwater management and erosion control concerns. A lot of our land use permits for environmentally sensitive areas, that's what it is. This rather busy site plan for a residential property where you can see a house, a detached garage, a driveway, some stormwater improvements, a sanitary system for this lot that's located on the Willow River. And it's got a fair amount of steeper slope as well, pardon me. Well, when the work is done, this is what we like to see. This is well done. A lot of erosion control measures, a lot of fabrics, protecting the hydro seeding and a lot of erosion control for a site where the slope drops off to the Willow River. Again, there's a lot of scrutiny on the front end, and there's a fair amount of inspection during the project and upon completion to make sure it's done right. Just another example, another property with where it slopes off, you can see in construction with preliminary grading and a nice end result here. This is what we like to see. No erosion problems, nice cover established, beautiful development essentially.
Mike, excuse me, can you go back 2 slides, please?
Sure.
So I just wanted to point out, if you go back 1 more slide, Mike,
Yes.
that the pink on that site plan, that's area of greater than 25% slope, and the area between the pink and the house is actually about, it's less than 25%, but it runs about 20%. So if you move forward to the next slide,
Yes.
then you can see that to the right there, the area that has all the erosion control, that's an area that's about, between
12 to 20, I'd
12
say.
to 20% slope, and then that area below that, that's the 25% slope, the very steep, dark area below the erosion control mat and stuff. So just kind of give you a visual of what kind of areas we're talking about when we talked about that previous amendment to the zoning ordinance. Thank you, Mike.
Certainly. We've had steady land division, as I alluded to previously, in the county. Last year, 2021, was a particularly busy year with many minor subdivisions and at least 8 major subdivisions, which are the 5 lots and greater. This will all, my point with this is not only was it a lot of work for staff, and largely it's a staff function to review land division applications, unless there's a waiver to our land division ordinance standards, which then comes before the committee. But this will result in subsequent work, the land use permits, the sanitary permits, so it's going to keep our division busy going forward. Just a couple examples of land division. Sometimes the minor subdivisions can take a fair amount of work too, because we have a lot of environmentally sensitive property in the county. But often the major subdivisions are especially labor intensive. And Bella Vista is an example. This was reviewed and at least conditionally approved in February of this year in the town of Star Prairie. The committee dealt with a rezone of this property from R1 to the R2 district, preceding the review of the subdivision, so some of you may have some recollection of it. I'd note that this was complicated because, in part because of its location. It's abutting a huge wetland. It was strategic for the town because it enabled a street connection to allow a very long sort of dead-ended street to be extended for through traffic from other subdivisions, and it's just north of the River's Edge campground recreation facility, and there were some concerns from that group about compatibility, bringing more homes that there could be conflicts because of noise or other concerns related to their activities. So it just requires more work, and a lot of work with the stormwater review because, again, abutting a very substantial wetland. This slide, I just would highlight on this that these numbers of open lots, unbuilt lots essentially by town, and a total here as of last year. We have a lot of lots available for development. Some of these lots are retained by people. They buy the lot next to them and they hang on to it. Maybe when their kids got to go through college, it's an asset they can sell for development, or when they retire. But eventually they'll develop, and eventually it's work. And it's also, they're served often by infrastructure, by additional town roads that have to be maintained, and also stormwater facilities. So it all generates work, but you can see that there's a lot of a substantial inventory available. So we're not short of places for people to build in the county, and we're continuing to see a lot of land division activity. So we're seeing more. I just got one more on the subdivisions, and that's White Pine Ridge, just because this is a recent major subdivision that we've been reviewing, and it's now in construction, the site work for it. This is 34 lots in the town of Somerset. It's an interesting property because it's got a lot of topography. It abuts the Riverway Overlay District. It abuts federally owned land. And it's the first subdivision that we had reviewed by Stantec, who were utilizing to assist us with stormwater plan review and inspection of our more complicated projects, major subdivisions, or projects more involving more issues with stormwater management. And we had a good process. Stantec expedited their review so they could accommodate the developer's desire to start constructing yet this fall and largely get the improvements in. And we were able to meet their timeline, but also ensure that the site is going to be developed properly, and especially the stormwater management side of it is going to be done right. So good experience, and so far so good. Our work with, we're very impressed with our consultant Stantec and the team they have assisting us. I just share briefly our work on code violations, and I'll say generally non-compliance with permit requirements. You all see and know some of the things that are out there, the junk sites, for example. We're dealing with several of them right now. And that's in rural areas, that's a standard problem that almost every rural area has, and we're no exception to that. But it takes a lot of staff time, both our land use division staff, as well as corporation council staff as well. So we deal with other code enforcement issues too. We have a lot of compliance issues in the, especially in our Riverway and Shoreland overlay districts. We're dealing with several of those now as well, and then we sometimes have issues that come up that they're not. They may be caused by Mother Nature. It may be an erosion problem caused by a big storm event, but it may require permitting, issuance of a land use permit, and some grading and filling and erosion control measures to avoid negative impacts on our water resources, for example. Sometimes we deal with issues relating to home-based businesses or contractor yards. Sometimes they get started without permits. Sometimes they're not complying with permits. We have a wide array with the ordinances that our division administers of code violations and compliance issues. We're better prepared, being fully staffed, to attend to these. It was pretty challenging over the early part of my tenure with the county here, and not having enough people to follow up. And these can be time consuming. Some of these junk sites can take years to resolve. It's not easy work, but nobody wants this next to them, is my view of it. And so it's important work, and we take it seriously. Lastly, almost lastly here, I've got a slide with challenges and opportunities. We've got our staff. We have to retain them. We got to make the work interesting, fulfilling, get them trained, the newer people, and do our utmost to retain them, because institutional knowledge and experience and familiarity with the county is especially important for the work the Land Use Division does. So that's our mission now that we have some good people on board and are fully staffed up. We're working on training and certifications, especially for the POUTS and soil tester certifications that several of our staff need to get. One of them just passed the POUTS exam in September, so we're pleased with that. And things are going to get better, and we're going to be more resilient and more capable of keeping up with the sanitary program demands. And looking forward to that. And the staffing also will enable, as I mentioned, a greater focus on code violations and these permit compliance issues that we often deal with. And the ordinances are detailed, and many times there's an awful lot of requirements that people developing or modifying their properties are subject to, and we have to work to guide them through that process, but also to ensure that they and their contractors meet the requirements of our ordinances and our permits. And lastly, I'd say we're trying to build stronger working relationships with the towns to manage the growth and change that's coming to St. Croix County and to better coordinate code enforcement activities. A lot of the code violation issues we deal with are referred to us by town officials. And so we have strong relationships with many of them, and they keep us busy, is what I would say. And we're doing the work we're supposed to be doing, but we have plenty of it. This final slide I'm going to run is just indicative of growth and change, 1970 through 2022. We'll see if it will run. It's showing areas where development has occurred in that time period. But just to shed a little light while it's running through the animation, the population of the county in 1970, I believe, was about 32,000 people. The most recent estimate I've seen for 2022 is 96,000 people. It's been tremendous growth here, and there's still plenty of land and there's still plenty of development activity, and a lot of it is in the rural area. A lot of it's dealt with by my staff as well as other community development department staff and other county staff. So we got a lot of work to do, and we're happy to do it, and we've got an intelligent, hardworking group, and that's our land use division.
Mike, that's really thorough, and I appreciate it. Does anybody have questions? Go ahead, Scott.
So Mike, in the past, we've always had a lot of issues trying to deal with code violations and dealing with it. And as you said, the staff has been short and stuff. I know part of the other problems has also been the coordination and trying to get things through, and especially with looking at things as it moves through from the actual violation. Then we get issues with, well, the code wasn't written right and they it was looked at in the court systems as kind of trying to pick it apart and look for, making it really difficult at best to try to keep within the intent of what the code was there for in the first place. Do you see that as we move forward with Corp Counsel and judicial support and things hopefully changing a little bit and being able to make some of this a little bit more expedient?
Yeah, I think so. Part of it is to be more methodical with the approach, to develop a system where you're almost treating it more like we do our permitting procedures, where we have predictable steps we go through, and we try to establish a timetable. We can't always adhere to it because sometimes the legal system doesn't support us to do that. But we can be organized, and we can know what the status is of a violation we're dealing with, and what the next step needs to be, pending, what level of cooperation we get from a landowner. That's what we need to do, and we have good cooperation from the Corporation Counsel's office. They're very busy too, of course. They have competing priorities, but we're happy with the support we get, and I think it's a matter of being organized and having sufficient staff so that, as the administrator, I can assign these follow-up on these violations to someone, and then we have enough people where it's reasonable to hold them accountable to get the work done.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mike. It's great work. All right, moving on, and I've been waiting for this all week. Review of mandated services. So what I've learned interacting with people this week is that we're not alone. Many, many counties are going through this process of reviewing mandated services. The lucky guys they are.
Well, thank you again. So mandated services this month, we're focusing on our Planning and Land Information Division, and Brett Boudreau is also here along with myself, in case you have any questions I can't answer. So, so a couple of quick overviews. As you saw earlier tonight, our Planning and Land Information Division, they are the lead staff people on things like our comprehensive plan, comp plan implementation, which means ordinance amendments, that kind of thing. That doesn't mean that the rest of our divisions are not involved. Mike will be heavily involved in anything that relates to his area, and so will other staff in relationship to other areas. Like with our ordinance updates, we usually have numerous meetings where Mike's team goes over it. There's an opportunity in our existing software for them to comment as we go through on every section of our proposed changes, that kind of thing. So we try to do it efficiently since everybody's so extremely busy, but we definitely always have a variety of staff involved, but these guys take the lead in these projects. A comprehensive plan is mandated. As we talked about a little earlier, it's something you have to have. You have to have it. This covers it a little more thoroughly, that it's required if a local unit of government, including a county, wants to regulate anything. And we are required by state statute to do a lot of the regulations that Mike pointed out in his presentation, such as sanitary, and, well, shoreland, floodplain, riverway, et cetera. So I won't get into that, but, and then comp plan implementation, no, you don't have to have updates to ordinances, and you don't have to have things like that, but you're not really doing your job if you adopted a plan and then you don't try to follow it and implement it and find ways to fund it, various things you want to do, activities. So there's grants and a lot of other things that we do to try to implement our comp plan. The next area is real property description. This is an interesting one. Brett and I actually had a couple different discussions on it. Real property description is technically not mandated. However, it says very clearly, statute states county board may delegate any of the following duties to the lister. Actually, this paragraph about these duties is mandated. It's just the county board has some leeway on who does it. So whether it's try to get the local municipalities to do it, which you can't actually require them to do, or whether to have the Register of Deeds do it, or whether to have the Treasurer's Office do it, or whether to create a separate lister, and that can be within another department, within a bigger department, which it is in our case. So this county made the decision a very long time ago, way before I became an employee here, so that tells you it was ancient times, that they were going to have it be part of the planning division, and that's where it is. So, and what they do is they basically process a whole lot of information. They're the go-between between all the town assessors, all the local town clerks, our county tax, our treasurer, and collection of taxation, and property valuations, and we do a whole series of things, which hopefully you had a chance to review. Land information plan and program, you've already had a couple presentations, and you've heard about that on a couple different situations, but basically it is our whole overall land information, keeping data and information available to the public regarding land ownership, our real property data, our mapping, our information on our layers of information, that's our GIS system, and making sure that we keep improving and changing it. As you also know from our budget process, the land information program is mandated, and it is funded by retained fees through the Register of Deeds office. It involves more than just our department. The whole program involves our county surveyor, it involves our Register of Deeds, and a whole variety of other people. You do not have to have a land information office, but generally speaking, when you have a program with a lot of money, it's a good idea to assign it to somebody, sort of lead the way, which is what we have. Brett Boudreau is our land information officer. He is within our department and heads up this whole division. And so once you have a land information office designated, which the county board did, then you also must have a land information council, which we do have. And that involves citizens, a variety of citizens, including realtors and people from local municipalities and also business people. And so that information council is someone that we report to and we show our budget to, and we talk about our projects that we're proposing, and the land information plan goes through that group. And we are required to do a land information plan as part of having a land information program, as it says up here. Another part of this division is just simply our geographic information system. We started this before land information program became mandatory in the state, but not a whole lot before. It was pretty close in time frame. And our geographic information system is basically taking all of our database information, all of the information about our different layers, our soils, our water bodies, our roads, our land use activities, zoning, planning, everything that we do, and having it all in a complete system that's available for a variety of uses, including other departments. We've worked with the Sheriff's Department, the Public Health, and with other areas, local municipalities extensively, and all so that this information is available. We make it available, and we make all our layers available for all the development industry to utilize. And private citizens can go in and look up an awful lot of information on our GIS system. One of the other areas that this is used for is the next one, our database address information system. We've worked with the Emergency Dispatch Center under the Sheriff's Department for many, many, many years, working with 911 and providing the address layer that's used to dispatch. We've added now, and our role is getting bigger because it's now going to E911, and that means that it's just a whole lot bigger project. And we were very heavily involved with the setup of E911 over the past year, and that will continue. That is not mandated, but it is required that someone provide that information. It could be done by the Sheriff's Department with appropriate staff, but at this point in time, it's been assigned to our department. Last couple things on here, redistricting. It's something that you guys are aware of because we redistricted, in the last year, and it took effect for this year's election. It is simply because of the many tools and the applicability and accessibility that our mapping system provides. It has been assigned to our department to do a lot of the legwork and present it to the local municipalities and be the interface since about 1980. So I'm sure years before that it was probably done by different divisions of the county when it was even more just different under the statutes. I'll leave it at that. So that's kind of a brief overview. Are there any questions? That would keep you here all night, unfortunately, too.
Well, that was thrilling,
Okay.
but I don't have any questions. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Ken, let's do finance.
Line 41110, 106,000. I won't read all of it to you. So financial report through the month of September. If there's any questions that you have on it, I'd be happy to answer. Otherwise, my general overview of the budget, where we are 3/4 of the way through, is we're pretty much right on target where I think we should be for the year. Everything in St. Croix County is above average. Yeah, everything's good. To add on to Mike's presentation earlier, St. Croix County over the last 5 years is now the fastest growing county in St. Croix, or in the state of Wisconsin. So we're no longer number 2. Take that, Dane County.
The fairgrounds haven't spent their money yet.
The fairground expense has been paid. We haven't fully allocated their tax revenue to them because we only do it once every month.
All right.
I guarantee by the end of the year it'll be right to zero.
Let's look at extension. I guess this is going to embarrass me because I'm not prepared with a question. Instructional aids, 230.34% red ink. It's probably going to be $3, right? $4,607 in parenthesis. Are we over or under? What is that, Ken? On
Yep, I'm looking at it. It's page 542 of the packet. So they budgeted $2,000 and they've spent $6,600. So yeah, they're significantly over on instructional aids, but they're significantly under in some other areas. Employee mileage, they've only spent about $2,700 out of their $12,000 budget. If you look at their program development, that's over by about $5,000. But then if you look at their printing costs, that's under by $3,000. So really, at the end of the day, what we look for from the departments is their bottom line. So do you maintain your operating expenses within the budget that's authorized for you? And so they are at they're at $137,000 out of the $270,000 budgeted. So we have more contract expenses to pay on them yet. But at the end of the day, it'd be 106. Yeah, there's still about 30,000 under with 3 months left to go. So I think they'll probably hit that. So one of the things we do is we always tell them where it needs to be expense it. Don't try to chase the budget. So if you have instructional aids, put it on there. And I know it's going to be a negative number, and I know Supervisor Hanson or Supervisor Ochterhoff would have asked about that. But that's how we want you to do it, because now I know next year I can see a trend that instructional aids are up. I need to adjust that budget then. So if you try to move it to follow the budget, I never know where you're actually spending it. So I do want to see the red numbers because that tells me how to adjust their budget in the future. But it does create questions for you guys. I know that, but that's okay too.
just as long as nobody's buying a horse.
Well, I don't know. They could be.
No, I don't mean from extension. I'm just. Okay, that's all I have. Anybody? Thank you, Ken. Moving on, announcements and correspondence. And I'm looking at you, Ellen. Anybody?
Just a reminder, if any of you have grandkids or anyone like that that might be interested, we will be having our second annual Halloween event at Homestead Parklands on Sunday, October 30th, not the 31st, from 2 to 5 p.m. Is that right? Or was it 1 to 5? Yeah, 2 to 5. And there will be lots of staff there, and we'll be dressed up in costumes. So, hey, picture opportunity if you're looking for something to do. I won't tell you what my costume will be. And who knows, Ken might even volunteer and show up. Yeah, I'm not thinking that's going to happen. All right. Anyway, that should be a lot of fun. And last year, as you might recall, for those of you who are new, you wouldn't recall, but we had over 700 people show up. And this year, we expect to have maybe not quite that many because the weather's not supposed to be quite as absolutely perfect, but it is going to be about 49, 50, which isn't bad, and no rain. So we're thinking 500, 600. So great opportunity to talk to people. We've had a lot of really generous support from local businesses and neighbors and property owners who are working with us to make sure that the event is positive for all. So with that, I encourage you to consider attending.
This is phenomenal. How did recycling go?
You mean the household hazardous waste collection?
That's what I mean.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, that was held last weekend. We did not have the numbers we expected. We think that we had made some changes because we are looking at moving to an electronic newsletter. I think we mentioned that during the budget process. And we think that we didn't quite reach as many people. So we'll be looking at that and trying to figure out what we can do. We had a good turnout. Cost was down. We still spent over $50,000 just in disposal costs. It's very expensive. I guess I would just say that we had one drum come in of something that when the contractor opened it, the cover got shut really, really fast. It got moved really, really fast, and it costs us about $2,000 to $3,000 to dispose of one drum. So we don't know what it was. I don't really want to know. So these things happen. So it's a good thing that we hold this program. Very good thing.
Better that than in the ditch. Okay. Moving on, requests for future agenda items. And remember, you can always send an email, make a call. All right. Date of the next meeting is Thursday, November 17, 2022. Yeah, we're always available. Be there, be square, and with that, I adjourn this meeting. Thank you for coming.